Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, January 14th, 2022. Time for another show. Time to end another week, as a matter of fact. And, well, terrific. I'm glad the week is over, because it kind of sucked, and we don't like it. And weekend is coming. That means something again in the Biden era, and that's good news. And, I don't know. Everything else is going to hell, but we are going to get our break. That's nice. And we have the long weekend coming up. I don't think that'll make a difference for us here on the show because we're the type of people who ignore federal holidays and get up and go to work on Monday because, especially, actually, if you're not, because then you'll be home and you'll be able to listen to us. So, okay, the Martin Luther King holiday coming up on Monday. And I think where we left off yesterday, we were getting all revved up for the fun filibuster showdown thing that was supposed to take place by Monday in celebration of the MLK Day holiday. They would be fighting for voting rights on the floor of the United States Senate, and they may still do that. And, well, I don't know. I guess there's nothing really has changed. I think by right around the start of this run-up to this fight, we were pretty clear on where the lines were and who would help us and who wouldn't. But, all right, well, we're having the fight. We're having the discussion anyway. And, you know, things could change. I mean, I think you could engineer a vote that under the right circumstances, if the planets align, et cetera, you could get Manchin or Sinema or both to agree that they weren't really voting to certainly not to get rid of the filibuster or eliminate the legislative filibuster or even create a carve-out, but just a procedural vote to table a Mitch McConnell motion. And, you know, that sort of thing can be done all the time. And, you know, you might create the ability for a one-off excuse to get people to do things like that. After all, they did just manage to, or the Republicans managed to talk themselves into doing it. Over the debt ceiling increase and convinced themselves and a significant portion of the world that they weren't really doing the thing that they were doing. Well, a similar mechanism can be set up to allow Manchin and Sinema to vote to support what we need to get done without actually voting directly on the thing. And they can still support the things that they say they support, like the actual voting rights. They can vote yes on final passage, and they can vote yes on tabling McConnell's appeal of the ruling of the chair, and thereby take care of all the dirty stuff without ever having a direct vote on creating a carve-out or eliminating the filibuster or anything like that. But, you know, we'll see whether they really feel like engineering such a thing. As I said, I think it's still largely disfavored among Democrats, you know, to draw the short straw and be the one in the chair that just rules against the advice of the parliamentarian. For whatever reason, they still prefer to say, no, the parliamentarian says this and I won't lie and tell you he didn't say that. Or, yeah, I mean, you don't have to lie. You can just say, I understand what the parliamentarian said. I think otherwise. But, you know, it's logically inconsistent, and I guess they don't find it a very easy thing to do. Which I guess is good, but sometimes you just want the things to go right. Okay, well, anyway, we'll see. You know, the trade magazines, the glossy stuff, The Hill and others, reporting under the headlines of the whole thing unraveling. I don't know if it was ever raveled to begin with. But at any rate, yeah, you know, the prospects are dim, and they always were, and they may go ahead with it anyway. We'll read whatever we can by way of roundup today. Plenty of other topics to touch on, including the note from Bill letting everybody know that today's radio show is live now. And this morning that I, Kagro X, David Waldman, will read the entire first presidential debate between Abraham Lincoln, I don't know, well, it's going to surprise you on this one, Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, but not the second one, because, come on, silly, the second one is until next week. So we'll read over that one later on. Now, why would we be discussing this? And the answer is the whole world is horrible, and we can't take it anymore, and we want off this planet. That's the actual answer. Now, why is that the case? Well, as you know, throughout America, parents just want to have a say in their children's education. That was the rallying cry of the Parents for Youngkin, who have now installed Glenn Youngkin as governor of Virginia. He was inaugurated earlier this week, along with a new majority a Republican majority in the state legislature, who vow to just give parents a chance. They just want a chance. They find it so difficult to have any influence over their children these days. It's all about education. It's all about making sure schools stay open, and possibly also transgender issues, and maybe CRT. And anyway, the point is, we now have to introduce all the legislation to deliver on our promises. Remember, the promise was parents will just have, they just want to have a say in their kids' education. And so, therefore, a new social studies curriculum is being proposed by at least one member of the House of Delegates, backed by many others, I'm sure. And, they want to make sure things are done right. So, of course, because freedom and individuals know better than the government, and they're going to lay out the particulars of an exacting curriculum to be dictated by, in this case, Richmond, to the entire state, how to teach civics and social studies in Virginia's high schools. So now you'll know, if you hire a Virginia graduate within the next couple of years, this is how they'll have been taught. Well, now the now viral tweet of Anna Jonas, who appears to be just a regular person and not a blue check mark thing or anything, so, the good kind of person. And this is interesting. I guess maybe she is a professor of education, perhaps, or something like that, or perhaps just a mentor among the teachers. All we can make out from her Twitter bio is that it says here, as my nephew says, I'm learning how to teach big kids how to teach little kids, right? Get it? Well, anyway, obviously somebody professionally interested in education, and refers us to this issue by saying Virginia's proposed social studies reform legislation is terrible for myriad reasons, but the assertion that the Lincoln-Douglas debates were between Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass is a new level of historical inaccuracy. Some of you may remember, of course, from your history instruction when you were in high school, obviously the Abraham Lincoln obviously debated on the Mike Douglas show on television in the 60s, the 1960s, of course, and come on, the idea that it could possibly have been Frederick Douglass, because Frederick Douglass wasn't alive in the 1960s and the 1970s. Give me a break, right? No, well, obviously, Stephen Douglas was on the other side of those debates, and I don't know if they don't know that. I don't know if there was a mistake. I don't know, but it got past everybody and into the legislation, and this is why, although it wasn't phrased very well necessarily, why you don't want parents dictating what gets taught in the classroom. And I think that was a statement that you could still stand by. It came out wrong when McAuliffe said we don't want parents to, I forget what it was, but we don't want parents saying what to teach in the classroom. You can have a say, you just can't dictate it, because when you dictate it, well, a number of problems arise, including dictatorship, but you also might dictate something stupid and wrong, and then what are you going to do? So all these poor kids who are trying to get ready for exams, standard of learning exams, or AP exams, who are going to be forced to be taught if they had not, caught this mistake. I assume they'll correct it before final passage of this bill. It is just a bill. and he's sitting there on Capitol Hill. But, you know, don't you want people who are going to dictate the new curriculum to know offhand that that's exactly, you know, I mean, some of the participants, the names of the participants in famous episodes of history? You can't? No? Really? All right. Well, she gives a link to the description of the legislation in Virginia's Legislative Information System, or LIS. You can find that, by the way, at lis.virginia.gov, which is exactly where I would put it if I were arranging the internet. House Bill number 781, offered on January 12th, 2022, which I think was the first day of the session, perhaps. That was the inauguration day for Youngkin, as I understand it. And by the way, I think we may have mentioned it because there were some pictures circulating of the mask wearing on the floor. The new Republican majority, of course, chucked out the mask mandate for the floor of the House, and Republicans taking full advantage of it and going unmasked. Democrats still sticking with the masking protocols. Although, you know, still questionable about whether we're getting through to people on the need to up the mask game. Well, it's not questionable. It's a definite yes, we still need to get through to them. They're not picking up on it. And people are reluctant to give up their nice cloth masks. We've been searching around for a year and a half for the best or nicest looking cloth masks, and now we realize, oh, yeah, we got to move to the N95. So... you know, a lot of people are reluctant to leave the cloth masks behind. And some of them were on the House floor the other day. But the Republicans running around unmasked, I remind them, I mean, I whisper when I remind them. I don't really want them to hear me necessarily, but you only have a 2-seat majority. And you can't be running around in the middle of the Omicron wave that's getting everybody with no mask on, especially if you're an anti-vaxxer, because you actually put at least your functional majority in danger. Quote unquote, don't do that. But actually go ahead and do that. I mean, I think it would be an exciting prospect to knock out, you know, a handful of Republican legislators, even if it was just taking them out for a while with illness and they weren't able to muster an actual majority on the House floor for some time. Now, if it killed them and there were special elections for their seats and Democrats won the special elections, well, I wouldn't turn my nose up at it. Stranger things have happened. It's your responsibility to survive the session. It's not my responsibility to make you survive. But it seemed like an awfully dumb thing to do to kick off the event with, one, a super spreader event, and two, one that demonstrates the incapacity of Republicans to govern or even conduct themselves as adults in public. But let's have them dictate a curriculum for us. By the way, so the text of this thing, it's not that long. You can read it through. You know, it's not 100 pages, but it's some dense stuff. But maybe we'll skip down to the fun stuff. But here you are. Be it enacted by the General Assembly of Virginia that the Code of Virginia is amended by adding a section numbered, who cares, right? 22.1-208.03. Okay? As follows. And it will read, student citizenship skills. Certain instructional policies prohibited. Parental rights, of course, you got to put that in there up top. Disclosures, penalties, and other remedies. They'll have penalties. So people will go to jail for this stuff. It'll be fun. I don't know. Maybe the penalties are civil. Well, Section A. As used in this section, divisive concept means the concept that, yes, so that begins with a definition. The things you can't teach. You can't teach divisive concepts. What are they? Concepts that one race, religion, ethnicity, or sex is inherently superior to another race, religion, ethnicity, or sex. And that's the opening salvo. Like everybody, we'll agree with that. Sure, okay, go ahead. I'm not certain what you mean by that, but it becomes clearer what they mean in the next section. 2, an individual, by virtue of the individual's race, religion, ethnicity, or sex, is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. Now I see where you're going. So it's prohibited. It's a divisive concept to teach which I don't think anybody is teaching, but they are saying, oh, well, it's implied in the teaching that a certain individual, like a white person, is what they're worried about here, by virtue of the individual's race, religion, ethnicity, or sex, is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. So something like, check your privilege. What are you doing? You're saying that somebody is holding themselves out to be superior to someone else when in fact they're not, and they are oppressive, even if it's unconscious. Prohibited. What else is prohibited? Divisive concepts such as that an individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partly because of the individual's race, religion, ethnicity, or sex. Members of one race, religion, ethnicity, or sex cannot and should not attempt to treat others without respect to race, religion, ethnicity, or sex. I don't even know what that means. An individual's moral character is necessarily determined by the individual's race, religion, ethnicity, or sex. An individual, by virtue of the individual's race, religion, ethnicity, or sex, bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race, religion, ethnicity, or sex. Slavery. Or, let's see, number 7 here. An individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of the individual's race, religion, ethnicity, or sex. You should feel guilty about slavery, which no one ever really, instructs in class. It's just, slavery was a pretty bad thing. Well, who did it? Well, it was black slavery, and they were enslaved by white people. Oh, I feel terrible about that. Now, that's your own doing. I didn't tell you to feel bad about that. You should feel neutral about that. Ready, go. Be neutral. Other things in here. What else? Prohibited divisive concepts. Meritocracy, punctuality, what? Proper language usage, free markets, and traits such as strong work ethic are racist or sexist, or were created by members of a particular race to oppress members of another race. Let's see. The ideology of equality of outcomes is superior to the ideology of equality, a concept enshrined in the Constitution of the United States. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. You got to play the whole national anthem every time you say that. Now that's according to law. It's right here. Whatever. Basically, now it's a divisive concept to say, our version of capitalism is maybe could use some improvement. You're out of line. You're going to jail. What else? So you get the idea here. At any rate, skipping down just a little bit further. Although, some of these things are so... I feel like this guy is... and who is this? The patron here is listed. That's how they say. Not sponsor, but patron. Williams. Now, that doesn't tell me too much. There's probably more than just one Williams in the House of Delegates, but maybe we could track it down. It's not a clickable Williams, but we'll see what we can find out. But if you get the feeling that he's like, she, I don't know, is outlining problems that they've had in personal conversation in the past for sending other people to jail for. What else here? We're up at number 10 here. Mathematics and scientific empiricism are products of Western civilization and thus are rooted in racism. That's getting taught all over the place, right? I can't do this algebra, but that's okay because it's racist. Well, okay, but algebra is actually Eastern. It's certainly not Western civilization. It's Arabic, but okay. So are all your numerals. Anyway, what else? The Commonwealth or the United States is fundamentally or systemically racist or sexist. And number 12 here, also divisive concept that you can't teach. Capitalism, free markets, free industry, and other related economic systems are inherently racist. Okay, that was happening a lot in grade school. The next section, B, the board shall, in furtherance of the citizens' skills portion of the 5 C's in the profile of a Virginia graduate, sort of like a mission statement for Virginia high school graduates, apparently. The board, the State Board of Education, shall incorporate into each relevant standard of learning and associated curriculum framework a requirement that each student demonstrate the understanding of, and this is now, yeah, right. So now legislators saying, I will design the final exam for social studies programs in the state. You will need to demonstrate the understanding of the fundamental moral, political, and intellectual foundations of the American experiment in self-government. That's over, but now that's why it's in the history course. As well as the history, qualities, traditions, and features of civic engagement in the United States. Which is interesting because one of the things that this later outlaws is civic engagement in the United States. Number 2, you'll also have to demonstrate an understanding of the structure, function, and processes of government institutions at the federal, state, and local levels, and the founding documents of the United States, including the Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution. Dun 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 dun. It's going to have to go through it every time you mention something like that. I probably should have done it for the Declaration of Independence too. I'll report to prison after the show. But what else do you have to learn about and demonstrate the understanding of? The Federalist Papers, including essays 10 and 51, the ones I learned about and didn't read any of the other ones and probably didn't even finish the assignment. Excerpts from Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, very specific. The first debate between Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. There it is. In section 22.1-208.03b3. There you go. It's not law yet, but that's where you'll find it, and probably by that time they will have corrected it. But yeah, you can't graduate from high school in Virginia if this guy's word was, if we just let this guy have a say in your child's education. I'm so saddened by the fact that this person cannot dictate your child's education. But your kids can't graduate until they get up and profess that it is a fact that Abraham Lincoln debated Frederick Douglass. If you say he debated Stephen Douglas, you failed. You cannot go to the University of Virginia. Yeah, that's right. Everybody at the University of Virginia, all their history graduates will be forced to believe that Stephen Douglas had nothing to do with the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and it was Frederick Douglass, who, by the way, spells his name with 2 S's, as opposed to the 1 S Douglas, I think, Stephen Douglas. But okay, they didn't read ahead. I imagine they'll correct this, but it's the sort of thing that makes you say, what business have you got dictating a history or social studies curriculum if you make this mistake? Anyway, the other things you have to demonstrate an understanding of is the writings of the founding fathers of the United States. That includes the grocery lists, George Washington, note to self, my wooden teeth hurt, talk to dentist / carpenter, and I cannot tell a lie, and throwing a silver dollar across all of that is all written down. The founding fathers totally said it, and something. Not what founding fathers, which writings, don't know, doesn't matter. I can't get that specific. It's just broad strokes legislation, except for the following things, specific things that you have to do, say, or study. Let's see. I'm curious whether they're going to put anybody in jail for this. No public school teacher or other instructional staff member shall be required to discuss any current event or widely debated and currently controversial issue of public policy or social affairs. That's interesting. The building is on fire, says the principal. Teachers, get your kids out. That is a current event. I'm sorry. I can't discuss that with the kids. It's controversial because a white supremacist set the fire, and you know how that goes. So, sorry, we're just going to have to sit here and... I don't know, it's a dumb interpretation of things. It's just, I want to point out not only how dumb it is to try to impose that, how dumb it is to try to legislate it, but if you were dumb enough to try to impose it, and dumb enough to try to do it through legislation, why would you take the language that was just recently national news and national controversy? You don't know about it because you weren't allowed to read about it or discuss it. I understand that. I guess that's the explanation. This was the language that they used in I don't remember which school district it was in Texas, when the administrator came in and spoke to the teachers and said, oh, by the way, you have to teach both sides of the Holocaust because that's a currently controversial or widely debated issue of public policy. Well, it's actually happened quite some time ago. It's a matter of history at this point. Wouldn't really be a current source of controversy, except among people like you, who believe that maybe it didn't happen, or maybe it was a good idea, or maybe the trains running on time was fine, and everything else should be ignored. I don't know. But they actually lifted that language from the stupid and embarrassing controversy from Texas and have brought it to Virginia. So, what happens if you do? Any such employee who chooses to discuss any such event or issue in the scope of his instructional duties shall, to the best of his ability, strive to explore such issues from diverse and contending perspectives without giving deference to any one perspective. Like, we dedicated ourselves, heart and soul, whole of government, whole of the populace effort to defeat Nazism. But maybe we shouldn't have. We should have had some debate. Maybe Frederick Douglass could have talked us into becoming Nazis, and we shouldn't have been so hasty. Why should December 7th have been a date that will live in infamy? We really should have been debating this until at least December 10th before we decided what to do. We might have, our entire history may have been very different if we had only taken a pause to decide more deliberatively what we should have been doing. We should have asked Frederick Douglass. Well, there's more. I think probably you get the idea of all this. I'll skim over the break to see if they send anybody to jail for anything. I don't think so. I don't know if they're quite that bold. But what a mess. And you voted for it, Virginia, because something, and you heard somewhere that in Loudoun County there was a boy who wore a skirt. And let me tell you something, now we all have to learn it's Frederick Douglass. That was a great choice. Good job. Never vote for Republicans. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I don't know, I have a feeling I want to continue to dig through this thing. This is impactful. I still have a kid in public school here in Virginia, and it's awfully dumb, so that makes for good radio, I think, generally speaking. But we'll hop around a little bit and make shorter work of this. But let's see. I think we left off by saying, terrific, we lifted the language from Texas that had been interpreted as teach both sides of the Holocaust. I'm glad to have that imposed on us. Let's see. Neither the board or department nor any local school board shall, 1, teach, instruct, or train any school board employee, contractor, or consultant, any public elementary or secondary school student, or any other individual or group to support, believe, endorse, embrace, confess, act upon, or otherwise assent to a divisive concept. So make sure when you get up in the morning, remember, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and I won't support, believe, endorse, embrace, confess, act upon, or otherwise assent to any divisive concepts. You also shall, here's the things you shall do, penalize or, why is this? Wait, neither the board. You shall not. Okay. Neither the board nor department nor any local school board shall penalize or discriminate against any such individual or group for refusing to support, believe, endorse, embrace, confess, act upon, or otherwise assent to a divisive concept. 3, remember, neither the board nor department or any local school board shall accept any funding from any source for the A, development, purchase, or choice of curricula or curricular materials that include divisive concepts, pertain to social emotional learning, whatever that is, I guess that's the new boogeyman, or otherwise violate any provision of this section, which doesn't make any sense, or B, the training or professional development of teachers that includes divisive concepts, pertains to social emotional learning, or otherwise violates any provision of this section. Next section, though. E, no school board or employee thereof shall, 1, require, incorporate into any course or class, or award course or class grades or credit, including extra credit, for student work, for affiliation with or service learning in association with any organization engaged in lobbying for legislation at the local, state, or federal level, or engaged in social or public policy advocacy. That's pretty interesting. So I guess no, I guess it's not such a big thing. You can't award grades or credit for it. Doesn't mean you can't participate in it, but it is interesting, the number of things that would encompass, like including being in part of the parent-teacher organization or association, depending on what they call it in your neighborhood. Let's see. You also can't award any additional grades or credit or extra credit or anything for political activism, lobbying, or efforts to persuade members of the legislative or executive branch at the local, state, or federal level to take specific actions by direct communications. Which, okay, no credit for it. It's not illegal to do as a student, just no extra or no credit or grades for doing any of that. Which is, a fairly common social studies project. Write to your state legislator or federal legislator on an issue of your choice, advocating the position you agree with, and share the results. Share your letter and what results you get. As a matter of fact, it's a requirement in the Citizenship in the Nation Boy Scout Merit Badge. Not that anybody was getting any class credit for it, but it used to be called civic engagement, and it was encouraged. But now, because CRT and somebody wore a skirt and something and parents and I don't know, and anyway, Terry McAuliffe, something, blah, 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 you can no longer have an assignment in a social studies class. Write to any legislator you want from any persuasion, any party, whatever. Tell them what you believe and what you want to happen in government. Don't get any credit for that. Because remember, we're trying to teach you how to be a good citizen by not doing any of these things, like talking to your legislators. All right, what else is you can't get credit for? Participation in any practicum or like activity involving social or public policy advocacy. Nothing in this subdivision shall be construed to prohibit or prevent any student from learning the process of government by first-hand observation. Just don't say anything. Go watch other people engage with their legislators. Let's see. No school board or employee thereof shall, 2, teach or incorporate into any course or class any divisive concept. We already learned what they are. 3, be required to engage in training, orientation, or therapy that presents any form of race or sex stereotyping or blame on the basis of sex or race. You also shall not create a position or hire a consultant with the job title of equity director or diversity director or a substantially similar title and with a job description that includes any activity that would result in a violation of a provision of this section. So no more diversity directors. I guess that makes somebody happy. I don't know why, but all right. You can't, no school board or employee thereof shall, and this is just, I guess, bad writing. This is another section. They just didn't give enough spacing to it. Okay, I was going to say, this doesn't follow. So section F here, the parent of each student enrolled in a public elementary or secondary school has the right to be aware of, all curricula instructional materials, lessons, and other forms of instruction provided to his child, and may request that the student's teacher provide any such item for review. That's probably already the case, but all right. Each teacher who receives such a request shall provide the parent an electronic or paper copy of the requested item within 48 hours of the request, or else we chop your face off. I mean, that's just, again, a frustrated parent who didn't get an email back fast enough. Now is going to say, it's now law that a teacher has to answer my request for anything that is ever used in their class, and they got to give it to me by electronic copy or paper copy within 48 hours, or else something. Section G here, each public school shall annually, no later than the July 1st preceding the upcoming school year, prominently list on a publicly accessible portion of its website everything. This is a disclosure now. Every school by July 1st has to publicly post all instructional materials and activities to be used for student instruction at the school, organized by grade and subject area. For the purposes of this disclosure, instructional materials includes textbooks, reading materials, videos, digital materials, websites, and other online applications. Activities includes assemblies, guest lectures, and other educational events facilitated by school board employees or outside individuals or organizations, and activities does not include student presentations. And before we continue on, now that means if you can't discuss current events at all. Guess what happened? Today, President Trump in 2024 declared it illegal to chew gum in class, which is fantastic because I've been pushing for that for years, and everybody thought I was a crank. But now it's going to be part. He said it in his State of the Union address. I'm sorry, you didn't tell us on July 1st preceding this school year on the website that you were going to bring this article up. You now get your face chopped off, I guess, whatever the penalties are. You didn't say. You can't change your mind about anything. And if a new book is published, even if it's published by Glenn Beck, you can't use it because you didn't say that on July 1st that you were using it. That seems so super flexible and empowering of local conservative teachers. Even they will love it. What else do you have to do? I'm going to read on because I did see an inkling of something really weird buried down at the bottom here. I want to make sure I got it right. So that sounds pretty strange. What else? All training, documentation, and review and approval processes performed by the principal or any teacher or administrator in preparation for providing such instructional materials and activities to students. So you by July 1st, you have to post all of the materials that you're going to use to train your teachers as well. And let's see, Section H here. Any individual, including any school board member who knowingly and intentionally violates any provision of this section, is guilty, there we are, of a Class 4 misdemeanor and gets their face chopped off. And in the case of a school board employee, may be terminated or, as applicable, have his license revoked or suspended in accordance with all relevant policies, regulations, and laws. So there you go. You said you were going to use this textbook, but then you used a Washington Examiner article instead. Not instead, but in addition to everything else, because it illustrated something that had happened that day that was directly relevant to your lesson. You lose your license. Or you can, anyway. And then Section I here. This was the one that I had to take a look at. In the event that a local school board finds that a school board employee has persistently, knowingly, and intentionally violated any provision of this act, the parent of any student affected by such violations may request, and the local school board shall provide, you ready for this one? This is the stealth. A voucher in the amount equal to all sums from any source that the local school board received for the education of such student, and the parent shall use such voucher to provide for the education of his child in any setting set forth in subsection A of section 22.1-254. And that's the end of this legislation. And do you see what gets buried in Section I here? If your child is taught by a teacher who the local school board decides has violated all of these prohibitions, you are entitled to the sum of money that your school board has gotten to, for the education of your child. That is, I guess, take the budget of the school board and divide by the number of students they have, and that amount of money is handed over to you as a voucher that you can take to take your kid to private school with. Private school vouchers buried in the last section there. Because CRT! Oh my God, we got to look out. No divisive concepts. If you don't teach that the Nazis might have been right, you can't really tell. Sure, 6 million Jews were murdered in the death camps, but what about the possibility that they deserved it, or they were going to be 6 million criminals, which is what the Nazis said. I mean, I know that sounds terrible, but I want to be fair. The Nazis, they're making an argument. He's in court. He's making an argument. He's a Nazi, but he's making an argument. And you got to present that. Maybe they weren't killed. Maybe they were all just taking time off. And, we have to present that. And if you don't, and you complain as a parent, and the local school board is on your side, and remember, they will be on your side because you're threatening to murder them if they won't be on your side, you get a school voucher. And everybody can go to the most expensive private school. All you have to do to get the most expensive, exclusive private school education is lie in wait for a teacher to say that something happened in the news, or, oh my God, that guy didn't post that on July 1st and say he was going to do it. That's it. Now I'm sending my kids to Exeter. This is fantastic. All for free. All on the public. It sounds like it won't go anywhere. It also sounds like they need a little bit of work on it. I just, I'd be interested in figuring out what's going on. By the way, there's a little feature on this legislative information system page here that I guess is supposed to, encourage civic engagement, which is now prohibited, of course. There's a little button here called Lobbyist in a Box, which is interesting because I'm always interested in things that are in boxes. Like a cat, I guess, in that sense. Anyway, Lobbyist in a Box, free bill tracking service. In other words, if you are interested in this legislation, you click here and it will track it for you, and I guess you can use the forms to contact the patron and supporters of this thing or anybody else in the legislature and refer to it and tell them your opinion of it, which maybe we should do. You just can't get any class credit for doing it because remember, we're teaching you civics here. We were supposed to shut up and let me tell you the way it's supposed to be, as dictated by the state capitol, which is exactly, maybe that is the best civics lesson we could possibly give you whenever there's Republicans in charge. Anyway, I wonder if we can find out who is the patron of this. I wonder how many Williamses there are, and I wonder where I would even find it. Let's see, members in session. I'm going to click through from this page on Virginia General Assembly up at the top. Then they have a link that says members in session, House member listings. Let's take a look at that. It is in alphabetical order, so we'll scroll down. How many Williamses have we got? 1, 2. Let's take a guess as to which one it is. Is it Angelia Williams Graves? I guess she would probably, I guess she lists herself as Williams Graves, but that's not what the name is on the legislation, Williams Graves. It just says Williams. Now, Angelia, Angelia, representing the 90th Legislative District, is a Democrat. And then there's a Republican Williams, Ren M. Williams, just because it's Ren and Williams. I turned the M upside down and made it a W. Ren M. Williams, representing the 9th District, a Republican. My money is on Ren Williams, Republican. Can I click on him? Yeah, look at there he is. And he's where's the ninth district? Counties of Franklin, Henry, and Patrick. Not Patrick Henry, but Henry and Patrick counties. And well, let's see. Anything else that we can find out about this guy? District office is in Stuart, Virginia. I'm not actually familiar with these counties or where where he is from. Let me take a look. Stuart, Virginia. Just curious about what region we're talking about. Patrick County. There we are. Let's zoom out and get a better sense of where in Virginia we're talking about. I'm seeing from the topography of the map, so we might be talking about the southwestern corner there. Oh, yeah, the extreme southwest of Virginia, down in between, I guess, in an area bordering North Carolina to the south and West Virginia to the north, and not that far to the west, you'll be in Kentucky. So way down in that corner, I guess what I would have guessed is the most extremely Trumpy red section of Virginia. So there you have it. And what do you know? He's writing a free ticket to exclusive private schools for all of his constituents anytime they decide that they can convince the local school board that a teacher totally and purposefully and repeatedly told the kids in class about things that were in the news. And that's a divisive topic. So, okay, just thought that was kind of interesting. And by the way, I guess that tells you that's the guy. Ren M. Williams is the guy who thinks that the Lincoln-Douglas debates were between Abraham Lincoln. And I should be happy that he got the right Lincoln correct. This is a debate between the Lincoln Tunnel in New York City and Frederick Douglass. Well, Southwestern Virginians just want to have a say in the education of kids in Northern Virginia. And what can you do? You got to give it to them. Because remember, Glenn Youngkin won by a few points and therefore gets to dictate the curriculum going forward. And if you can write history, well, by golly, I guess you'll win a lot of these elections. Okay. Yes. Moving on to other fun things. Greg sent me a note this morning that, let's see, focusing on the now widely discussed but controversial, so we can't teach it in school, story about all of the fake electoral college certificates being that were circulated a year ago. As it turns out, it sounds like somebody is finally, referring this stuff for investigation. I did notice a tweet from this morning from the Maddo blog Twitter account from last night after or during their show last night. It was breaking then anyway. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel says the investigation into the submission of a false slate of electors in the 2020 election has been referred to federal prosecutors. We think this is a matter that is best investigated and potentially prosecuted by the feds. And I guess I agree, although it's interesting too. I've kept asking the question. I don't understand why people haven't been arrested for this. And every once in a while I get earnest answers from people who say things like, well, why aren't the states doing something about it? And then others who say, well, they probably referred it to the feds, but remember that the Federal Department of Justice was under Trump's control all the way up until late January, probably transition time, early February of 2021. So, it couldn't have been done immediately. But, I did say, I thought that would be like a day one agenda item for a Biden DOJ. Forged electoral college certificates. Or if not day one, because, Trump did a lot of things wrong. Week one, month one, year one. I thought they would get around to it in the first 365 days of being in charge of the Department of Justice. They didn't, but they did have an insurrection to deal with. And we do also have some news on that front, of course. you will all have heard by now that the guy, the weird-looking eye patch guy, not the one that's a weird-looking eye patch guy from the Republicans in Congress, but weird-looking eye patch guy who leads the Oath Keepers or Oath Creepers or whatever they're calling themselves these days, is arrested and charged with sedition. Yes, sedition, the charge we've all been waiting for. It's been very interesting to watch in the last day or so as that development or news of the development spread across the internet. Because, of course, you know, right-wing wackos of various stripes have spent the whole time between January 6th and now saying, it's ridiculous that you keep calling it an insurrection and sedition. Name one person. How come in all the people who've been arrested for this, nobody's been charged with sedition? But you keep saying it's sedition. It's not sedition. If it was sedition, they would charge someone with sedition. And guess what? They charge somebody with sedition. So I guess that's it. It's sedition. And by the way, they've been calling it terrorism as well because people have been charged with terroristic acts in this as well. But I had a feeling that... that would become an argument for people. Anyway, we'll get to that in just a minute and fill you in on those sedition charges and what they did and why they were stupid. Not the charges, but the people. They're stupid because they were seditious, and in particular that they left behind records basically texting one another saying, do you want to do some sedition? Yes, let's do that sedition. And like reading the statute and saying, I hereby declare that I am doing the following things. They basically set themselves up. Anyway, so back on the topic of the fake electoral certificates. That's what passes for action in Michigan. People said, well, maybe things aren't happening because in Arizona the Attorney General is a wingnut Republican. Okay, well, what about in Michigan where the Attorney General isn't a wingnut Republican? I don't know. So I guess pressure got ratcheted up, and now we know. The Michigan Attorney General says, you're right, it's terrible. Someone should do something about it. Call the feds. Now, they're a little backed up at the moment, but I guess they get around to it. Maybe they'll charge, now that they're charging people with sedition, maybe they'll be able to get to this. But Greg sent me a tweet from Will Bunch, who says, if you watch Rachel Maddow, you've been following the bizarre saga of the phony electoral college votes in 5 to 7 states, part of the run-up to the January 6th coup. If you haven't been watching Rachel Maddow, you might have been following the saga by listening to me tell you about the goddamn saga. I don't understand why. I don't know what has made it a hot topic after a year, but I guess I'm glad it has, because at least now that reminds people like me of saying, hey, yeah, how come nobody's getting arrested for that? And then, they ask the attorneys general and they say, that's right, you should ask a more important attorney general than me to do something about it. Will Bunch goes on to say, in my Inquirer column, that is to say his, I dove into the scandal, what happened in Pennsylvania, one of the 7 states, and some unanswered questions. I hope that there are answers, is what I'm looking for. Oh, I've reached my free article limit. Oh, that's incredible. What's the deal? What is the deal with the Philadelphia Inquirer? I've read more than one Philadelphia Inquirer article. I mean, I try to read what Will Bunch says every once in a while, but he says it on Twitter, so I usually don't have to read it. Does he have more to say in his tweeting about it, or what? It's not a thread. I pocketed it, and we'll see whether Pocket allows you to sneak a read past their paywall, which, a well-designed website would not have. But Will Bunch might have, wink, wink, left it out there for us. And it looks like he did, because he's such a cool guy. On December 14th, 2020, 20 prominent Pennsylvania Democrats gathered in Harrisburg in a ceremony shorn of some of its pomp and circumstance because of COVID-19, but witnessed by a gaggle of reporters to cast the state's electoral college votes for the president-elect, Joe Biden. They dropped their ballots in a wooden box designed by Benjamin Franklin. Like, that's real cool and stuff. Then Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar, who'd certified that Biden defeated Donald Trump here by more than 80,000 votes, told the gathering, today you will follow the tradition of the first electoral college that convened in Pennsylvania 231 years ago and cast your votes based on the outcome of that election to carry out the will of the voters of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But at another undisclosed location in Harrisburg, with no press coverage, a band of 20 top state Republicans had other ideas, meeting at what they said was, quote, the request of the Trump campaign, unquote. The GOP luminaries, including two men now running for governor, former Congressman Lou Barletta and consultant Charlie Gerow, Gerow, cast what they called a procedural vote that claimed Trump as the winner. The documentation claimed the ballots were cast just in case a court ruling or some other proceeding overturned Biden's victory. The existence of this vote was not a secret. It was even heralded by the Pennsylvania Republican Party in a news release and mentioned by the Inquirer that day. But what wasn't yet known on December 14th, 2020 was the full extent of plotting among Trump's inner circle to have Vice President Mike Pence and Congress somehow invalidate Biden's victories in the battleground states like Pennsylvania, or that a violent pro-Trump mob would overrun the Capitol on January 6th in an attempted coup to stop the certification of the legitimate electors. Now, a revelation that Republicans in 5 other states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, took the December 14th gambit a step farther, is placing the entire operation in a new light. By sending paperwork to Congress and the National Archives that falsely claims, without qualification, that they were the, quote, duly elected members of the Electoral College in states where Biden got the most votes, the entire operation looks more sinister. A recent report in Politico found the House Select Committee on January 6th, which is weighing whether the actions of Trump and his aides were part of a conspiracy to obstruct Congress, is looking at some of this paperwork. Beginning with the Politico report, the flames of controversy have been fanned by nightly updates on the bogus certification letters by MSNBC's highly rated nighttime host, Rachel Maddow. So lots of credit to her for doing this. Now, don't try to teach this in social studies in Virginia. You'll lose your license, and all the kids will be sent to private school on the taxpayer dime. But Rachel has also noted not only similar language in the letters filed with the National Archives, but even similar font styles, suggesting the effort was centrally coordinated. Yes, we'll read a little bit more about that, and about Pennsylvania's efforts in particular. I found something else that was weird about what was going on in PA back then, and I'll share that with you after this. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on At Roots Radio. We were back in Pennsylvania reading Will Bunch's, illegally reading Will Bunch's Inquirer article, thanks to the magic of Pocket, which gets us around a couple of paywalls. And I'm sorry to the staff of the Inquirer, including Will, that we're not paying into the fund right now. But, we're tragically understaffed and underfunded on the left. If I was James O'Keefe or Project Veritas, I'd have money to spread around for you. Anyway, let's see. Maybe sometime in the near future. I don't recall reading that many Philadelphia Inquirer articles. I don't know what the limit is. I mean, the limit might be 1. So maybe that's the part of it. Anyway, where were we? Yes, right. Beginning with the Politico report, the flames of controversy been fanned, which means you can't teach it in Virginia. And yeah, pointing out that they had not only similar language, but similar font styles, like somebody was handing out a template for these things. Right now, there are a lot more questions than answers, including who exactly in the Trump campaign requested that the Pennsylvania Republican Party and presumably the GOP electors in other states hold these votes and submit documentation, which include the formal signatures of the Trump electors casting these ultimately meaningless ballots. Was Trump himself, as well as others in his White House and campaign inner circles, aware of this scheme? And how did his allies envision ultimately putting these election claims to use? Those are questions that I asked at the time in December of 2020, saying, I don't even understand exactly what they think is going to happen here. You're going to send this election certificate. How does it even get to Mike Pence's hands? Like, I assume it is received by the clerk in the House, but it's being sent. You're supposed to mail a copy to the President of the Senate, but I assume somebody is opening the mail there and checking it and deciding, well, 1, does it have any anthrax in it? And 2, are these electoral certificates? And 3, are they real ones? And should we hand them over to the Secretary of the Senate, who can instruct the floor staff to hand them over to to the tellers and to Mike Pence himself. I think you give them to Pence, and Pence will open it and announce the state and then hand the certificates to the tellers. That happens on the House floor during the joint session, and the tellers then read the certificates. And, you know, the idea that somehow somebody inside the Capitol building would, I mean, I guess it could happen, given that there are so many Republicans who claim to believe that this is true, or that at least you ought to try to see if you can make other people believe it's true. I guess some person could slip in the fake ones, or it could be by accident, I guess, but presumably they're pretty well-trained people, and they learn to recognize what a real certificate looks like, and of course they would have heard on the news how Pennsylvania went. But let's say they didn't. It's a pretty long-shot thing to hand over those certificates and have them make them past the mailroom and past the clerk of the House or secretary of the Senate or whoever handles this mail, and past Pence, except Pence could be on the side of declaring that it's real, and then past the tellers, and then past everybody in Congress. That nobody in Congress would remember how Pennsylvania voted, according to the news, and say, wait a second, hold on a minute. You just said this thing appears to be regular, informed, and authentic, and it says that the electors for Pennsylvania voted for Trump and Pence, and that's not right. And you would have a protest. I think it doesn't just go, oh, well, we said it and put it in the record, so too late now. There's nothing we can do about it. So it's a good question. How did you think that you were going to put these things to use? Other unanswered questions from Will Bunch. Although Pennsylvania Republicans seem to have wisely hedged their bets, did GOP officials and would-be Trump electors in those 5 states making false, duly elected claims cross a line and commit an act such as forgery or fraud? I guess Pennsylvania didn't use that language. The templates, I don't know whether they got templates or not, but the real electoral certificates, of course, do say that the undersigned are attesting to the fact that they are the duly elected electoral college. And when you are, and you're on solid ground. When you're not, but you're claiming you are, you have a problem. But I guess apparently the Pennsylvania certificate didn't say it that way, which was pretty smart. I guess that's the hedging of bets. So, that's kind of crazy. Number 3 here. What actually happened behind closed doors in Harrisburg on December 14th, 2020? Specifically, why did as many as 7 veteran party insiders, and I'd like to stress that again, please, I'll pause for a second, something I said the other day. Remember that the people who were slated to be Trump electors if Trump won any state, every state, this is the case. How do you get to be a member of the Electoral College? You're nominated to the position by the various campaigns of the candidates, and it, generally speaking, goes to prominent party activists. Members of Congress are, I believe, current members of Congress, prohibited from acting as electors for various reasons, not the least of which is that they're the ones ultimately counting and verifying the vote. But former members of Congress are often included. Prominent state legislators are often included. Activists, donors, for that matter. But the point is that if there's a forgery going on, if that's what we decide to charge with, you're talking about top and prominent Republicans from every state that did this. This is like a gold mine for Democratic campaigns, should they choose to use it, which, of course, they never do. But anyway, it's out there. So what actually happened on December 14th, 2020, behind closed doors, a different set of closed doors in Harrisburg? Why did as many as 7 veteran party insiders, and it's linked here, I might tell you who they are, but, like I said, the documents are signed. Here's the list of Republican electors and the people who signed for these things. I mean, none of the names jump out at me besides the ones mentioned in the article, but maybe they mean something to you in Pennsylvania. I'm sure you'll recognize some of these names. So, did they cross a line and commit criminal acts such as forgery or fraud? And, well, let's see. Why did as many as 7 veteran party insiders who ran as Trump electors, such as, I'm going to call some of them out, I guess, former Chester County Sheriff Bunny Welsh, that's always funny, ex-party chair Rob Gleason, longtime GOP big shot Bob Asher, and others, why did they ultimately not sign the paperwork, only to be replaced by others? Oh, interesting. So they ducked it because they knew, this is probably not a great idea to expose myself to legal charges. So the alternates signed in their place. In the December 2020 official Pennsylvania Republican Party statement announcing the, quote, procedural vote, Trump State Chair Bernie Comfort cited the precedent of a 1960 vote taken by Democratic electors in Hawaii when the GOP's Richard Nixon was leading the vote count, although Comfort's statement failed to note that Democrat John F. Kennedy actually did win the vote recount there. We took this procedural vote to preserve any legal claims that may be presented going forward, Comfort said at that time. This was in no way an effort to usurp the contest or the will of Pennsylvania voters. The Republican vote was sent to the National Archive, but apparently not to the Chief Judge of Pennsylvania's Middle District, as is normally done, and was done with the legitimate Biden tally. Yet, arguably, the vote fit into scheming underway in Trump's Washington orbit to do exactly that. As Team Trump, lost court case after court case in the late fall of 2020 contesting Biden's victories in key states, the focus shifted to efforts to bully Vice President Mike Pence on the dubious legal argument that he could use his power as presiding officer over the January 6th election certification not to accept Biden's slates in such states as Pennsylvania. Ultimately, 145 Republicans, 138 House members, and 7 senators voted unsuccessfully that night to reject the Keystone State electors, a scenario which could have put the alternative slate in play. Though not directly, still curious as to how they would have come up with that. But anyway, now there is mounting evidence that the House Select Committee is looking at the role these alternate slates played in a broader plot, and possibly one that crossed the line into criminal conspiracy to disrupt the January 6th certification. This includes whether the deadly insurrection on Capitol Hill was part of this scheme after nonviolent maneuvers failed. In its recent memo seeking criminal contempt charges against Mark Meadows, Trump's chief of staff at the time of the insurrection, the House January 6th committee claimed Meadows received text messages and emails regarding apparent Republican efforts in certain states to send alternate slates of electors to Congress. The committee's referral, citing evidence uncovered in months of so far behind closed doors investigation, said that when a member of Congress told Meadows this scheme was highly controversial, which means you can't teach it in Virginia, Trump's top aide, that is to say Meadows, replied, "I love it." The committee also said that it has a Team Trump email from November 7th, 2020, the day the TV networks called the election for Biden, that alternate slates of electors would be part of a direct and collateral attack, that's a quote, attack, on the Democrats' win at the ballot box. Just under 2 months later, the collateral damage from this unprecedented effort to contest an election victory around a big lie of non-existent voter fraud was 5 people dead or dying on the grounds of the seat of a badly tarnished United States government. On December 14th, 2020, the alternate votes, like the one held in Harrisburg, were ignored because they looked ridiculous and pathetic. But now we know better. These false pretense certifications matter for 2 reasons. The first involves getting to the bottom of what really happened on January 6th, and what did a president know and when did he know it? Investigators are trying to learn whether Team Trump's plans for the day amounted to an attempted coup, with talk of involving the Insurrection Act, shutting down the Capitol before a Biden certification, and seizing the ballots. In that scenario, these bogus electoral votes could have been inserted into the jigsaw puzzle of autocracy. But arguably, these bizarro world electoral votes matter even more as America braces for 2024. In the 2020 election, Republicans largely lacked the legal mechanisms that would have been needed to make these pro-Trump electoral votes in states where Biden actually won matter. So there's a concerted effort to change that. In the months after January 6th, GOP lawmakers in at least 8 states enacted laws that moved more control over election results to more partisan bodies, like state legislatures themselves. Additional extreme measures are still being debated ahead of November's midterms and the 2024 race for POTUS. In December of 2020, the idea that state lawmakers could reject the presidential electors of the candidate who won fairly and squarely at the ballot box and replace them with electors from their own party on trumped-up grounds was too far out for most Americans to take seriously. After January 6th, it's no laughing matter. There must be consequences for the people who actually thought this scheme could work in the 2020 contest, or else democracy may be murdered in broad daylight on or about January 6th, 2025. It's a good point. It's worth remembering, and it's worth remembering alongside this reminder, which I dug up when I was searching around for my own treatment and discussion of these weird forged electoral vote certificates back in December of 2020. So this is of interest. I tweeted around with this reminder. Not only were Republicans forging electoral college certificates, they were forging signatures on Republican letters backing the scheme. That is to say, they were lying about the election, but they were also lying about whether or not other Republicans supported their lies. What am I talking about? A December 5th tweet, my own, which notes, as if it weren't outrageous enough that Pennsylvania Republicans were calling for a January 6th challenge to the electoral vote count, the letter calling for it faked how many Republicans signed on. They just love lying about anything they can. And I have included here a screen grab from reading Politico, bad enough, on my phone. And I don't know, I don't think I guess it looks like I didn't put the link to the article in there, but maybe we could search the text and find it. But a quote from a letter from Republican legislators in Pennsylvania, quoted in this Politico piece. We, the undersigned members of the Pennsylvania General Assembly, urge you to object. They're asking for the membership of the Pennsylvania delegation to object to Pennsylvania's electoral votes being counted on the grounds that they really should have gone to Trump. We, the undersigned members of the Pennsylvania General Assembly, urge you to object and vote to sustain such objection to the Electoral College votes received from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania during the joint session of Congress on January 6, 2021. The lawmakers wrote in a letter to the state's congressional delegation. The important part here is highlighted. Though an initial version included 75 signatories, more than half of the GOP lawmakers in the legislature, it was quickly pulled after some lawmakers indicated they didn't intend to sign on to the letter. In other words, the letter to the Pennsylvania delegation saying, we want you to object to Pennsylvania's electoral votes on January 6th, had a bunch of forged signatures on it that would give the impression that the majority of Republican state legislators in Pennsylvania supported the action. They didn't. But they just forged signatures on there to make it look like they did, just as they forged an electoral college certificate and sent that on. Although, I guess arguably, Pennsylvania may avoid that fate by not claiming to have been signed by the duly elected electors of Pennsylvania, if that's the case. That's how what Will intimated in his article. Okay, just wanted to remind you of that. They forged the documents, they forged letters about the documents, they forge everything. And yet, here we are, just, waiting to find out what the hell we're going to do about all this stuff. All right, well, there's a lot we're trying to find out about and learn what's happening here. I mentioned the Oath Keepers dude, and maybe we'll just jump over there and read a little bit about him and a little bit about what's happening here. Oh, before I do, I can make a correction to the record. Yesterday, I sang the praises of Bram Resnick from, what was it, KPNX TV, who had, I thought, been asking the aggressive questions of Arizona legislator Jake Hoffman, trying to get him to answer the question of, well, who told you to show up at the state capitol to cast your electoral votes illegally as a part of the Arizona forgery of the Electoral College documents? And, this was the question he wouldn't answer. You ask the GOP chairman. Well, did the GOP chairman ask you to go? Well, ask them. You don't know who asked you to go? Remember the whole thing. And I said that was great. But as it turns out, the video, yes, was provided by Bram Resnick, who had, in fact, begun the questioning of Hoffman. But when Hoffman runs away from Bram Resnick, his colleague intervenes and says, I actually want to ask you some questions. And it's the colleague who asks the follow-up questions of who asked you to go. The colleague is Arizona Republic reporter who, I don't know, what's your name? Because they tweet as Ruela's Writing. So I guess I don't know who the first name is, but so-and-so, Mr. Ruela, R-U-E-L-A. Why doesn't his profile actually identify him by name? I don't know, but maybe you already know if you're a reader of the Arizona Republic. But at any rate, Bram Resnick here tweets his thanks to his colleague for properly following up on things here. Let me see if I can jump all the way back. No, of course not. Why would hitting the back button take you back where you wanted to go when you could just screw yourself up? Here we are. Bram Resnick saying, journalism can be a team sport. GOP State Representative Jake Hoffman refused to answer 12 News photojournalists' questions, which I provided, regarding why he signed phony declaration in 2020 that Arizona electors voted for Trump. Watch as the Arizona Republic's Ruela's Writings follows up. So calling him out by Twitter handle and giving him proper credit for that. So, okay, I just want to, I would say I wanted to clear up who did this aggressive follow-up questioning, except as it turns out, all I have is a Twitter handle, so I don't exactly clear it up. But you can always go there to @Ruela's Writings and tell them I saw it and it was awesome and good job and what's your first name, so that we can credit you properly. All right. So with that semi-correction, sort of kind of on the record, let's jump over to the Oath Keepers guy story from the New York Times. Oath Keepers leader charged with seditious conspiracy in January 6th investigation. The FBI arrested Stuart Rhodes, the founder of the far-right militia, in a major step forward in the investigation into the attack on the Capitol by supporters of Donald J. Trump. And although he looks like a oaf and an idiot, it turns out, as some have pointed out, Stuart Rhodes is, I guess, a Yale Law School graduate. So presumably he's no dummy, but, they do produce some whoppers there. And people have been pointing out of late, oh, by the way, the anti-elites who hate all the elites and want to fight on behalf of the common man, et cetera, et cetera. A significant portion of them Yale Law graduates. I don't know whether they're teaching that at Yale Law or not, but I think they're just self-hating elites is essentially what's going on here. But number of them being called out. Anyway, like I said, eye patch guy, Stuart Rhodes, you might recognize him from that. Not the eye patch guy from Dan Crenshaw from Texas, but this eye patch guy. By the way, I also learned yesterday, eye patch, where'd it come from? Not just part of a costume to look tough. No, it's a gun fail remnant. He dropped a gun at some point and shot his own eye out. Yeah, like the BB gun in the Christmas Story. Shot his eye out, and I don't know. Yale Law School didn't teach you not to do that, so what can I tell you? But this story by Alan Feuer and Adam Goldman explains the situation. Stuart Rhodes, the leader and founder of the far-right Oath Keepers militia, was arrested on Thursday and charged, along with 10 others, with seditious conspiracy. over what prosecutors said was their wide-ranging plot to storm the Capitol on January 6th last year and disrupt the certification of Joseph R. Biden Jr.'s electoral victory. The arrest of Mr. Rhodes, 56, was a major development in the sprawling investigation of the Capitol attack. He and the other Oath Keepers are the first to be charged with sedition among more than 700 people accused so far of taking part in the assault. Mr. Rhodes was arrested shortly before 1 p.m. at his home in Granbury, Texas, his lawyer, Jonathan Mosley, said. So Texas got the monopoly on the eye patches. The Justice Department has brought a variety of charges in connection with the Capitol attack. It's prosecuted about 275 people for obstructing Congress's duty to certify the 2020 presidential vote count, for example, but it had not previously brought a sedition charge with the legal weight and political overtones it carries about an election in a highly polarized country. The charge of seditious conspiracy, which can be difficult to prove, requires prosecutors to show that at least two people agreed to use force to overthrow government authority or delay the execution of a U.S. law. It carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. The last time federal prosecutors brought a sedition case was in 2010, when they accused members of the Michigan militia plotting to provoke an armed conflict with the government. They were ultimately acquitted, as it turns out. Prosecutors say that beginning only days after the 2020 election, Mr. Rhodes oversaw a seditious plot, quote, to oppose the lawful transfer of presidential power by force. Some members of the Oath Keepers under his command broke into the Capitol in a military-style formation on January 6th and went in search of Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the indictment said. Others, it said, were stationed at a hotel in Alexandria, Virginia, as a armed quick reaction force, ready to rush into Washington if needed. The Quick Reaction Force, later abbreviated in their communications QRF. These guys had such a tactical jargon party going on in their communications. They love the technical jargon, and it's just so childish looking. It's part of their cosplay thing. And every once in a while, when you explain just how loopy they are with their cosplay nonsense and pretending they're military, whether they're ex-military, pretending they're still military, or never were military, pretending they are, stolen valor sort of thing. The problem with discussing how stupid sounding it is it makes it sound like they're a joke and they couldn't have pulled off something like this. And ultimately, obviously, they would have failed. You think, like I said, it has always been my belief that, if you stormed the Capitol, you would just be gunned down. But apparently that's not true anymore. Maybe they knew it, or maybe they were just guessing, or whatever. I don't know. But the lingo that goes on between them, we'll see whether any of the excerpts are reprinted here. But if not, their social media communications with one another are out there. Which, by the way, maybe some secure channels for such militaristic type dudes at some point in the future. I mean, I don't want to suggest it because it'll make it harder to find you. But anyway, in addition to Mr. Rhodes, prosecutors charged Edward Vallejo, Vallejo, I'm giving it the Spanglish pronunciation, himself 63, of Phoenix, for the first time in connection with January 6th. He's had no other charges against him. The 9 other militia members named in the indictment had all previously been charged, although not with sedition. Mr. Vallejo was part of the Quick Reaction Force teams that the militia had deployed, which were equipped with firearms and other tactical equipment in case Mr. Rhodes called upon them to support the plot, prosecutors said. The team included Oath Keepers from North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona. Mr. Rhodes, a former Army paratrooper who went on to earn a law degree at Yale, they gave it to him. I don't know how well he did, had been under investigation for his role in the riot since at least last spring, when, against the advice of his lawyer, and he is one, he sat down with FBI agents for an interview in Texas. He was at the Capitol on January 6th, communicating by cell phone and chat app with members of his team, many of whom went into the building. But there is no evidence that he entered the Capitol, or none that they've disclosed so far anyway. Over 48 pages, the new indictment painted a detailed picture of Mr. Rhodes' activities starting only days after the 2020 election. Just 2 days after Election Day, Rhodes told several members of his group to refuse to accept Biden's victory, the indictment said. "We aren't getting through this without a civil war," he wrote on the encrypted chat app Signal. "Too late for that. Prepare your mind, body, spirit." 1 month later, after plotting with underlings in several states, the indictment said Rhodes told members of his group on another encrypted Signal channel that they should use violence to stop Biden from taking office. That will get you in trouble, won't it? "It will be a bloody and desperate fight," he wrote. "We are going to have a fight. That can't be avoided." Through their lawyers, members of the Oath Keepers who are already facing charges have said they converged on Washington just before January 6th, not to attack the Capitol, but instead as part of a security detail hired to protect conservative celebrities like Roger Stone, a longtime ally of former President Donald Trump. How odd. And, of course, he denies having anything whatsoever to do with them because he wasn't pardoned for that. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Let's continue the reading of the story of the Oath Keepers eye patch guy, Stuart Rhodes, getting arrested for sedition, and then hop around and cover a few other items, I think, in the last segment of today's show. In an interview with the New York Times last summer, Rhodes expressed frustration that several members of his group had gone off mission by entering the Capitol on January 6th, quickly adding, "There were zero instructions from me or leadership to do so." I think he saw trouble coming and probably lying about what actually went on. But at least 4 Oath Keepers who were at the Capitol that day and are cooperating with the government have sworn in court papers that the group intended to breach the building with the goal of obstructing the final certification of the Electoral College vote. That's pretty plain. Rhodes has also attracted the attention of the House Select Committee's investigating January 6th, which issued him a subpoena in November. In a letter at the time, House investigators noted that Rhodes had taken part in several events intended to question the integrity of the 2020 presidential election throughout that fall and winter. On Election Day, the letter said, Rhodes said that an honest count of the votes could only result in a victory for Mr. Trump, and called on members of his group to stock up on ammo and prepare for a, quote, full-on war in the streets. But not in the building, of course. With his distinctive black eye patch, the result of a gun accident, they note in brief passing, Mr. Rhodes has been a fixture on the far right almost from the day in 2009 that he announced the creation of the Oath Keepers at a rally in Lexington, Massachusetts, the site of a famous Revolutionary War battle. At the event, Rhodes laid out an anti-government platform for the current and former law enforcement and military personnel who joined his group, saying that his plan was for members to disobey certain illegal orders from officials and instead to uphold their oath to the Constitution. During the Obama administration, the Oath Keepers repeatedly inserted themselves into prominent public conflicts, often playing the role of heavily armed vigilantes. In 2014, for instance, they turned up at a cattle ranch in Nevada after its owner, Cliven Bundy, engaged in an armed standoff with federal land management officials. That same year, members of the group went to Ferguson, Missouri on a self-appointed mission to protect local businesses from riots prompted by the death of Michael Brown, a black man who was shot by the police. In other words, they were looking to get themselves into a Kyle Rittenhouse situation and just didn't succeed. Kyle, it turns out, was able to do it at age 17 when the full-grown, super cool military guys couldn't pull it off a couple of years earlier. After Trump took office, Rhodes and the Oath Keepers pivoted away from their anti-government views. Isn't that interesting? and appeared to embrace the new spirit of nationalism, and suspicions of a deep state conspiracy that had taken root among some of the president's supporters, including the president. Like other far-right groups such as the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers also opposed, often physically, the Black Lives Matter protests that erupted in 2020 in the wake of the murder of George Floyd by the police in Minneapolis. Isn't that interesting? They love the government when it kills black people. According to the indictment, Rhodes became more serious about stopping Biden from assuming office in early January. The same month, he began spending thousands of dollars on military-grade firearms, ammunition, and other tactical gear. I imagine he spent some earlier, too, but that's an interesting way of putting it. Prosecutors have not accused him of bringing any weapons to Washington on January 6th, but they said that Mr. Vallejo and other members of the Armed Reaction Force outside the city discussed the possibility of, quote, armed conflict and guerrilla war. Rawr. Mr. Rhodes seemed to relish the chaos at the Capitol on January 6th, like Trump. Prosecutors said the indictment noted that shortly after 3 p.m. that day, a member of his Signal group chat sent him a message saying that members of Congress had been, quote, given gas masks and are trying to get out. Mr. Rhodes was said to have responded with a dismissive obscenity. F them, I think, was the obscenity. That evening, prosecutors said Mr. Rhodes, Mr. Vallejo, and other Oath Keepers met at an Olive Garden restaurant in Vienna, Virginia, to celebrate their attack on the Capitol and discuss the next steps. Well, when you're there, you're insurrectionists. Thousands of ticked-off patriots spontaneously marched on the Capitol. Mr. Rhodes wrote that night on his Signal group chat, "You ain't seen nothing yet." Always threatening more, always a great stance to take when you are under indictment for insurrection. Okay, just wanted to get that on the record. There are other more pointed profiles of Mr. Rhodes elsewhere in the mainstream media, but I thought I would point that one out and just sort of lay the groundwork, just put it on the record that that's who they busted most recently. I also wanted to add this one to the continuing January 6th saga. This piece from the Daily Beast on Mo Brooks. Mo Brooks is the January 6th congressman who can't keep his mouth shut. Very interesting. The subheader, I guess, sums it all up here, but we'll read a little bit. Facing a lawsuit for his January 6th attack speech, Representative Mo Brooks has put himself in a bind of his own creation. He potentially violated his oath or misused congressional resources, alleges Jose Pagliari, whose pieces we've read before from the Daily Beast. This from the 12th, 2 days ago. Someone may need to tell Representative Mo Brooks to stop talking. The Republican congressman from Alabama keeps defending himself in court against accusations that he helped incite the January 6th riot, and it's not helping the former prosecutor in the slightest. The particular defense Brooks has chosen seems aimed at having Justice Department lawyers mount the legal defense for him. He is arguing that his incendiary speech on January 6th was part of his official duties as a congressman, a crusade he continued in federal court on Monday. If that is the case, Brooks may have opened himself up to potential removal from office. And if it's not the case, as prosecutors are trying to prove, then Brooks has handed prosecutors all the ammunition they'll need to charge him with misusing congressional resources. In his shaky attempt to prove that his January 6th speech was part of his official duties, and his view is, if you see it as part of my official duties, then you'll know that it's protected, it's constitutionally protected speech. It's certainly First Amendment protected speech is what he's arguing, but also that, he was giving the speech as part of an execution of his official duties, and you can't arrest me for that. There's protection against prosecution for that. Well, if that's the case, then of course they'll simply say, then Brooks has introduced evidence that his staff spent taxpayer time preparing him and helping him with his January 6th speech, and so he's been misusing official resources. Now, if Brooks falls back and admits his speech was a form of campaigning, as prosecutors are arguing, then he may have a whole new set of legal problems. Brooks has created a classic damned if you do, damned if you don't legal conundrum. But, you should be damned for what you did on January 6th. Ciara Torres Spelisi, Torres Spelisi, a visiting professor at American University Washington College of Law, told the Daily Beast that part of the problem was Brooks's decision to be his own lawyer. There's an old phrase that a lawyer who represents himself has a fool for a client. That seems apt, Torres Spelisi said. Brooks, a Trump loyalist who perpetuated unfounded voter fraud claims, spoke to protesters near the White House on January 6th, at the Ellipse, right? And during his 10-minute speech, while wearing a bulletproof vest, Brooks said January 6th was a day for, quote, kicking ass, which is not so bad by itself, repeatedly mentioning how the ancestors of the protesters had sacrificed their blood and sometimes their lives. Are you willing to do the same? Are you willing to do the same to fight for America? Brooks said. Louder! Will you fight for America? The crowd later surrounded the Capitol, savagely beat police officers, smashed their way into the building, tore through offices, stole furniture and electronics, searched for politicians with kidnapping tools, threatened to kill them, and erected a gallows outside. After the attack, Representative Eric Swalwell sued Brooks and other speakers at the political rally, including Donald Trump, his son Donald Trump Jr., and hero mayor turned election conspiracy theorist Rudy Giuliani. And why you call him a hero mayor, I have no idea. In federal court on Monday, U.S. District Judge Amit Mehta, we've heard from him before, listened to Brooks argue his defense, one designed specifically to give him immunity by shielding him behind the government and forcing the Justice Department to fight the legal battle for him. Every act I took, every speech I gave was within the scope of my employment. They are all part of my job duty, he told the judge, referring to his responsibilities as a member of Congress. Brooks asserted that would include the part where he yelled to protesters, "Today is a time of choosing and tomorrow is a time for fighting." Okay. William Bullock Pittard, a private attorney representing Swalwell, pointed out that Brooks wants the government he harmed to now represent him. Meanwhile, a DOJ prosecutor argued that Brooks was actually delivering a campaign speech at a Trump campaign rally. Hilariously, the evidence was clear because it came from Brooks's own court filings, in which he tried to explain away incendiary language by claiming that choosing, in his speech, meant which senators and congressmen to support and oppose in future elections. His speech, tomorrow's a time for fighting, referred to future elections. So his previous court filings have said the opposite of what he's there arguing that day. Interesting. As for the part of his speech where he said, "Today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass," the congressman's own court filings describe it as purely electioneering. Well, then it's not part of your official duties. My kicking ass comment referred to what patriotic Republicans needed to do in 2022 and 2024 elections, he wrote back in July. The DOJ prosecutor, Brian M. Boynton, used those assertions to ask that Judge Mehta block Brooks from gifting himself a free government defense and immunity. It's a bedrock principle in our democracy that the government must remain strictly neutral when it comes to elections, Boynton said on Monday. I think it's very clear in the capacity with which he was acting, Pittard said, citing the documents as well. By reaching for government protection, the congressman may have exposed himself to even more legal trouble, maybe even expulsion from Congress, said Jessica A. Levinson, a law school professor at Loyola Marymount University. Members of Congress are allowed to have very broad latitude when they use this protection. Having said that, what happens was an insurrection, and if we consider that to be the business of Congress, then we've really strained that definition to its breaking point, she told the Daily Beast. It's fair to say, okay, well, if this is how you conduct yourself officially, then you should no longer be a member of Congress. Helping someone incite an insurrection is an impeachable offense, she said. But of course, we don't impeach members of Congress, we expel them. But it might trigger 14th Amendment stuff, that's for sure. Judge Mehta has not yet ruled on whether Brooks can have the Justice Department come to his rescue, But during the 5-hour hearing, the judge showed little patience for the clumsy attempts by attorneys for ex-President Trump and Giuliani to whitewash or minimize the insurrection. Mehta has already presided over several criminal cases involving rioters. If Brooks fails to convince the judge he was acting officially as a congressman and falls back on the concept that he was campaigning, he could face charges for misusing congressional resources. That's because, once again, Brooks himself laid out in court documents how he directed his office to be involved in every aspect of the speech, starting with the plans made with the White House. I then delegated to my congressional staff the task of working out the details of the speech, and then typed it up in my office at the Rayburn House office building on my congressional office computer, he previously wrote. I also timed, reviewed, revised, and practiced my ellipse speech in my office. During his presentation before the judge on Monday, Brooks claimed there was nothing in the House Rules of Ethics that he violated in his speech. To make his argument, Brooks pointed to the failed Ethics Committee complaint against him by Pramila Jayapal last March. Although it was clear to all those in the virtual hearing that the process merely failed on party lines. Brooks's congressional office did not respond to the Daily Beast's questions about the congressman's solo legal strategy. While he did graduate from the University of Alabama's law school in 1978, he entered politics as a state-level representative just 4 years later, and the State Bar Association currently lists him as not authorized to practice law in Alabama. Legal scholars have noted that Brooks has placed himself out in the cold, alone. The House of Representatives would normally have a strong self-interest in preserving immunity for its members, regardless of party. The fact that the legislative institution refuses to come to his aid shows how egregious his conduct was, legal scholars told the Daily Beast. We're in pretty uncharted legal waters here, so I don't have a prediction of what a court will do with a congressman versus congressman suit where there was life at peril at the Capitol because of an unprecedented insurrection, Torres Spelisi said. Whew, okay. So what we learned from that, of course, is that Mel Brooks is a great guy. Mo Brooks, pretty dumb. Mel Brooks sometimes a little goofy too, but, for comedic effect. Mo Brooks in Congress, probably not a great idea. All right. Let's see. Other things I wanted to note for the record, a few smaller bore items. Oh, yes, this was an interesting one. A tweet from Michelangelo Signorile, radio personality in his own right, noting for the record that the speech by Kirsten Sinema yesterday, which seemed to spike the effort to somehow skirt around filibuster rules, no matter how it was engineered, in order to pass the voting rights legislation. Of course, Sinema stood there and said she supported the legislation. She simply refused to clear the way for it procedurally because she was, because she's a big believer, she says now, in the filibuster. Now, people have found video of her speaking in earlier stages in her political career when she was running for the House, in which she was pretty clear about her disdain for the filibuster. But now she's got a newfound appreciation for it, and awesome, wonderful. And she's got a newfound appreciation for a lot of things. This is the observation for which I grabbed the tweet. Video of her speech on the floor yesterday from C-SPAN 2, in which she is quoted as saying, laying out her position. But Michelangelo here says, does he go by Michelangelo? Does anybody call him that, or does he have a nickname? I don't know. I forget. Anyway, noting that Kirsten Sinema, when she was sworn into the Senate, very famously did not swear on a Bible. My recollection is that she swore, and you can do that under the rules, swear on any, tract that is meaningful to you, whether it's a Bible or anything else. And she chose a copy of the Constitution, and I think annotated Constitution and rules of the Senate and House and Jefferson's manual, etc., and swore on that. But she famously did not swear on a Bible because she is the first senator who said she has no religious affiliation, which he points out he thinks is a pose from back when she was in the Green Party. But at any rate, whether it has anything to do with Green Party politics or not, I couldn't tell you. But yes, she very pointedly did not swear in on a Bible stating I don't have a religious affiliation, I don't entertain religious beliefs of that sort. But now, here she is, as he notes in her floor speech, wearing a gold cross necklace. I've been taught the difference between a crucifix and a cross lately, so didn't make that mistake. I used to refer to it that way myself, but that was because so many of the people who wore those things in my growing up day were Catholics and did in fact wear crucifix, that is to say, with Jesus upon the cross as opposed to just the cross itself. But now in evangelical circles and Protestant circles, the plain cross, it seems to be the way people are going by way of jewelry. But there she is. Wouldn't swear in a Bible because she didn't have religious beliefs. It seems like an interesting thing to do, right? And as he puts it here, she famously didn't swear in on the Bible because she's the first senator who said she has no religious affiliation. Opposed from back when she was in the Green Party, but now she's wearing a cross while posing as a Republican. I think that says it all. It is an interesting observation. I would like to ask her about that, but of course she also wears a ring that says F off, and so the answer is probably be F off. But I'd be curious to know if we could somehow pick her brain about that. What is it that made you do that? For somebody who, made a point of not swearing in on the Bible, that seems interesting and strange. Okay. Let's see, here's some other interesting and strange stuff. I didn't capture the video of her speaking out about the filibuster from when she was in, back in the old days when she opposed it. Although I think the video was actually her calling for, including certain provisions in reconciliation. Although I think, the reason she was calling to include them in reconciliation was the stupid filibuster, which I oppose, stands in the way of doing it under regular order. But now that she's in the Senate, she's changed her mind. But there is some tape here that might be of some interest to play through. Walter Einenkel had put this up over at Daily Kos, and I'm sure it will be of some interest to you. And the headline says it all. Here's 2005 Mitch McConnell arguing why the Senate must change filibuster rules. But of course, he's opposed to any such changes. Now, you see, it's quite obvious. So let's see. I'm going to see what sort of...
In the middle of the 20th century, senators of both parties on a nearly biennial basis invoked Article 1, Section 5 constitutional rulemaking authority. Their efforts were born out of frustration of the repeated filibustering of civil rights legislation to protect black Americans.
So what I'm playing here, by the way, is C-SPAN footage, so I don't think we'll have any copyright problems with going ahead and do it. Not that YouTube will understand that this is public domain material necessarily. So we'll chop it up a little bit and make comments from here from time to time. This would be, in 2005, we'd be talking about, this is when Republicans were preparing to exercise what they called the nuclear or then constitutional option to eliminate the filibuster on judicial nominations because, of course, Democrats were blocking many of George W. Bush's nominations to the federal judiciary. And, it was weird that they discovered that there really was, in fact, a legitimate mechanism for majority vote rulemaking and threatened to use it. And then, of course, they ended up getting shut down by the agreement of the Gang of Eight. But then in 2013, when Democrats said, we'll actually do that now, Republicans realized that, back in 2005, we were totally wrong, and that's why we oppose this whole thing now. Anyway, it's interesting to hear him give this speech. Let's see what else he has to say.
A minority of senators had filibustered legislation to protect black voters at the end of the 19th century. They'd filibustered anti-lynching bills in 1922, 1935, and 1938, anti-poll tax bills in 1942, 1944, and 46, and anti-race discrimination bills. In 1959, Majority Leader Lyndon Johnson agreed to reduce the number required for cloture to two-thirds of senators who were present and voting because he was faced with the possibility that a majority would exercise its constitutional authority to reform Senate procedure. He knew the constitutional option was possible.
So there you go. That's, of course, endorsing exactly what happened in 2013. But remember, he was opposed to that because it would ruin everything and turn the Senate into the House. I don't know. I guess, as expected, there's a lot of right-wing commentators pointing out, when the shoe's on the other foot and Republicans are in charge, Democrats will revive their old opposition to eliminating the filibuster. And, of course, one good question is, well, why would they do something like that? Would that be because the people who insist that the filibuster is some part of the foundational, basics of our republic, and it's what the founders intended, and turning the House into the Senate would be a terrible thing, and all these horrible consequences would come from eliminating the filibuster, but then they all of a sudden forgot all of that and are threatening to eliminate the filibuster? Why would Democrats be making speeches extolling the virtues of the filibuster if it wasn't under threat? Right? But, everybody has switched sides on this stuff, as you can tell.
Additionally, the Senate has voted 4 times for the proposition that the majority has the authority to change Senate procedures.
Yes, they have.
For example, in 1969, senators were again trying to reduce the standard for cloture, that is, to cut off debate from 67 down to 60. To shut off debate on this proposed rule change, Democratic Senator Frank Church from Idaho secured a ruling from the presiding officer, Democratic Vice President and former Senator Hubert Humphrey, that a majority could shut off debate, irrespective of the much higher cloture requirement under the standing rules.
Yes, and suddenly that is not allowed, and a horrible thing that will result in all sorts of catastrophe for the United States, because you don't want it to happen because you're in a minority and using the filibuster. So, yeah, people switch sides. It's just interesting how eloquently he puts all of this and is in such favor, and bringing out examples of Democrats did this. Democrats wanted to do this. So really, they're the ones who are the hypocrites in all this, as opposed to me. Sure, of course, that explains everything. Well, you get the idea. And probably not worth the rest of the day being dedicated to that. How about something else, something completely different in the few minutes we have left, even though it means that I'm going to have to pronounce something that I'm probably going to screw up. I just wanted to alert you to this because now you got the weekend coming up. You're going to have some time on your hands. You may even have an extra day off for Martin Luther King Day. Well, what if you wanted to get away from politics and spend some time instead on, pursuit of your interest in and love of, let's say, art? Well, that would be a good thing for you to do. That would keep your mind off of things. What if you wanted to do so, though, with a friend of yours from the KITM universe? What if that friend was Darwin Darko? Would that surprise you? It surprised me. I had no idea he was so interested in exploring the, the world of art, but apparently a major passion of his on the side. Darwin has a website of his own and parks a lot of his own art discussion podcasts, it looks like, all available for your review and enjoyment at darwindarko.com. How much easier could it be? But a section of is there a main page that you'd have to navigate past? Yes. And by the way, the most reasonable man in America, it says right in on his page, and a fantastic photo accompanying it. But darwindarko.com brings you to the front page. But the art discussion, how would I navigate to it from the front page? There's a Project Darwin that is available for inspection, and the podcast. Is it the podcast that brings us there? I don't know. Yes. There are several. There's the Challenge Day set of podcasts, but also the Ekphrastic. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Ekphrastic. Are you into art, or at least like to pretend that you are? Me too. I need to pretend that I am, so I need an education. Maybe this is where I'll go. The word ekphrasis, do I have that right? Comes from the Greek for the description of a work of art produced as a rhetorical exercise. It is a vivid, often dramatic verbal description of a visual art piece. How interesting is that? Well, you'll be able to find out exactly how interesting it is as he takes on, let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 episodes. Oh, more. Oh, that was just without scrolling. This will keep you busy all weekend if you want to binge on this stuff. I'm late with our outro music here, by the way. You'll have to pardon me, Justice, as I cut into the time allotted for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with time I'm allotting for Ekphrastic instead. First episode, if you really aren't sure, you can dip into the serious arts, but you love the pop art of Bob Ross, you can join in that way. That's an easy entree into the whole genre here, but everything is here. Georgia O'Keeffe is here. Picasso is here. What else do I know as a total neophyte? Salvador Dali is here. Frida Kahlo. Leonardo da Vinci, I think we've probably all heard of that guy. He's like totally famous and everything. Andy Warhol, Basquiat is here as well. So plenty for every taste. And, you know, a real surprise for me. I had no idea he was so into art, and maybe you didn't either, and you'd like to give him some time. These podcasts not nearly as long and tedious as mine. Most of these, just a few, anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes discussion on that. Plus, of course, you got other options from darwindarko.com as well. They're easy enough to find, right? You want to spend some time doing stuff like that over the weekend? Why not? Take your mind off of the mess that is politics. But if you haven't had enough of the mess that is politics, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes up next. Justice Putnam will be your guide through that mess, and I'll give you some hint at what mess in particular he'll be talking about.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Yes, of course, the overarching story, the GOP still plotting the next coup, as Manchin and Sinema say they won't stop it. Then on the rest of the menu, 8 House Republicans caught in ethics scandals are campaigning for re-election. What do you think of that? Well, it won't matter very much, I suppose, if they gerrymander their way back into the House. Stay tuned for that and more. See you next week.